Welcome to the Opportunity Podcast, where entrepreneurs come to learn from real buyers, sellers, and industry experts on the lesser-known growth opportunities to build their online business empires. We'll uncover tactics veteran online business entrepreneurs have used to build, buy, flip, and sell their way towards personal wealth. Sit back, grab a coffee, and get ready to uncover hidden growth secrets. The Opportunity Podcast starts now.
And welcome back to the Opportunity Podcast, your go-to resource for hitting growth opportunities throughout online business. We're your hosts. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Sarah, and thanks so much for joining us for our latest episode. Today we'll be speaking with John Hefter, the Senior Vice President of Creative and Brand Strategy for Thrasio. Most people know Thrasio in the online business world for their prolific growth building and an incredibly strong Amazon FBA portfolio that's led them to become the fastest U.S. company to reach profitable unicorn status. So no small deal here.
Yeah, definitely. This is a really exciting call that we have with John today. So he's also going to be covering how Thrasio has been able to build momentum in their FBA portfolio and shares what other FBA owners can learn from their success. So we don't want to give away too much now. So let's dig into the interview and see what John has to share. And at the end of the episode, we'll go over some of the best listings on the Empire Flippers marketplace that highlight the growth opportunities we've learned about here today. So let's get started. So, all right. Thanks, everybody, for joining us again for another episode of the Opportunity Podcast. Really excited to have our guest on today is John Hefter, and he's with Thrasio, a large fund that acquires a multitude of businesses. So, yeah, it's really great having you on the call with us today, John.
Happy to be here.
Before we dig deeper into kind of your story and background and kind of where you've got started in online business, why don't you give us a general introduction on how you got started, your background, and kind of what you're currently working on?
Sure, absolutely. I'd love to do that. I've told this story many times, so I'll try to be as precise with my words as possible. So I'm on the founding team, with the co-founders being Carlos and Josh Silverstein. And Stephanie and I, who's head of operations, joined before really this was a company. Carlos had a Facebook ad agency that was rather successful, and I used to do brand consultations for him, and we were also close friends. And what we discovered was that there were a lot of people who have Shopify stores who were coming in, and we were hearing these whispers about how well they were doing on Amazon. And Josh and Carlos had been talking about doing e-com roll-up for quite some time without having that particular context to it. So as soon as all of those things sort of converged, the decision was made that Amazon would be our best way to pursue our aim, so to speak. So Carlos actually had an exit from his previous company. Both Josh and Carlos have had multiple exits in the past, and they were tied into the fundraising community. We were able to get a small tranche early on to test out our thesis, acquired our first few brands. First one didn't go so hot. The next 5 or 6 went absolutely gangbusters, including some that we purchased from Empire Flippers, which I can talk to a little bit in a bit. Once we sort of reached this feedback loop where we found a way to acquire businesses successfully and then tie operational systems around them, that then it just exacerbated their growth. It led to this sort of terrific serendipitously timed story that opened the door up to some really serious fundraising. And from day one, we were always looking a year ahead. So as our growth happened at a really just a scale that's almost unprecedented before, we were ready to bear that burden, so to speak. So just this last July, there was a press release. It was announced that we were the fastest profitable company in U.S. history to reach $1 billion valuation. The idea started roughly 3 years ago. Actual execution, we're hitting around 2 years and change. So that's a long way from 4 of us hanging out in a Dunkin' Donuts office next to a dumpster to where we are now, which is, if you include international, a team approaching 500 people.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see where you got your start from the very beginning. A couple of the co-founders, you guys are, had your hands in a few other side projects at the time, and, an exit that kind of led you into all coming together and building this giant company. And yeah, it's really interesting to see. So, right at the beginning, what was it, you saw with starting Thrasio, this large company, that you saw as that your primary focus would be on online businesses and, let's say, in the FBA space or, whichever space you guys prefer. Now, what was that initial just push that you said, okay, this is what our primary focus is going to be on?
in some ways, the idea of simplicity and scalability is just there in e-com where it isn't in other places. Like I can take a product from $1,000 a day or zero to $25,000 a day in sales. And if you think of some other industries of how difficult that is, and by the way, I can do that without ever talking to the customer, right? Without ever seeing the manufacturing facilities per se, although we have people on the ground everywhere we do, manufacturing. And so what it allows us to do is to scale at a rate that's almost unprecedented in history, even including traditional consumer product group companies. And I think that's what really Josh and Carlos locked into, and was the idea that we can take this, and because of sort of the new world of e-com, we can grow something faster than ever been done before.
Yeah, I love that take, you calling it just sort of the new world and saying there's this unprecedented simplicity and scalability with these businesses. But I'd have to imagine, when you were starting out at a certain point, before you raised the money that you raised and you became, the fastest unicorn in the US, there had to have been certainly a point where maybe you were having to convince skeptics of the power of FBA. I'm kind of wondering if that was ever something that you faced, and kind of at what point did things change and you started just getting investors on board with what you were doing?
Well, I think people were intrigued, particularly in that world, about the novelty of the idea. Right. I think clearly, if you had a conversation with our senior team, you realize quickly that we have a plan and will likely draw positive results, is what I would say. Right. Like we sort of cross every T and dot every I when it comes to what our plans are for execution and how we're going to optimize the company that we acquire. So I think what we needed, though, as you said, was there was plenty of people willing to put their toe in the water, but we needed that sort of provenance of proof, right? A track record to get to that next phase. And by the way, that is the challenge at scale. So while I said it's a simple idea, the actual execution and to do it right, and the amount of learning that we had to do and the speed we had to do it and the type of people that we needed to bring into our organization in order to see consistent success is an immensely complex matrix, right? It would be confounding to many people. And that's the piece that I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding of what we do, as in these guys are just sort of aggregators of FBA businesses. We always started out with the thesis that no, we were going to be top world-class operators first, right? Because we were going to know everything inside and out of Amazon and in the e-com space, so that when we had the opportunity to acquire a brand, that we were going to take it to a level that's never been seen before. And that institutional focus and dedication to figure out what that might or might not means is the reason for our success. And on top of that is the understanding of the natural complexities that come with acquiring businesses from all over the world, right? And how to layer in the accounting nexus and all those other pieces. Not really my forte, but is this the stuff that makes the magic sort of happen? That really is the part that, looking back, still impresses me that we were able to pull it off, to be frank with you.
Wow. No, I mean, it's like you said, it is so much more complex than people make it out to be. You can't deduce what you're doing to being aggregators of just FBA businesses. I mean, you are way too large of a team. You've got way too complex of an operation going on to be just that. And it's like you said, you set out to be world-class operators, and you've done it. And it's incredible what you guys have really been able to do. And so I definitely have some questions sort of down the road in the interview talking about, team building and things like that I'm sure is a part of your story and part of your growth strategy. But first, I wanted to start digging into this idea of growth and opportunity. So, walk me through, when you see a business that you could buy, what are the criteria that you're kind of looking for that make a great opportunity? This is something we ask a lot of our guests, and everybody has something different. Some people say, oh, I go for a certain niche, or, I'm looking for a business that's on the up at just this cusp here or there. So I think as someone, who's an expert in the field and definitely has a sense of what good opportunity looks like, what's your take? What is it that you go for?
Well, look, I'll say this in very general terms, right? Everything's on an actuary table of risk and benefit, right? So for us, we take each individual business and we make an assessment of what's 2 years from now going to look like. And what are the risks associated with this category, this product set? Is this a fashion wave of types? Is there obsolescence that can come with these sort of products? And we then build that together as part of our internal valuation. The one thing I'll say in general is that most third-party sellers, there's some super smart, exceptionally capable people who run these businesses, but most of them are understaffed in the sense that they might be really good at PPC on Amazon or sourcing from China or somewhere else. They might be really good branding people. It's exceptionally rare. And I'm talking about, I've seen this in maybe 2 out of the 75 businesses we've acquired, where everyone has their stuff together, right? Where they kind of know how to do everything. So for us, the opportunity might lie in saying like, all right, well, these guys are really good branding guys, but you know what? They really didn't know what the heck they were doing with PPC. So we see that as an opportunity where if we take over the business, we can sort of take it to a new height, right? And generally those opportunities lie across the board. So then it really just comes down to what verticals do I understand? What product sets do I know a bit about or know how to compete or figure out a way to differentiate from the rest of the market set with some creative branding ideas or product extensions? And I lay everything out as like in the sense that I look at a brand, in 2 years, where can I take this thing and how am I going to do it? And what are my risks? And you lay it out like that in a real simple sort of model. And if you do that and you have a sense that you can take it somewhere, you're generally in a good place. So what I would say as a general warning is just don't force something when you don't have that laid out.
I think that's great advice.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that we also discuss as well all the time, John, is, making sure that you're, highlighting your strengths in a business acquisition versus, stepping or dipping your toes, as you would put it, into something that you're not familiar with. Oftentimes we might see first-time buyers that come in and they think, oh, I understand how to do PPC advertising, and then come to find out the business model was actually generating most of its revenue through SEO. So it's definitely something to keep in mind while you're looking through these types of acquisitions to make sure that it is a strength that you are familiar with.
Yes. And I would say another thing too, if you're a first-time buyer, like you got to be committed to make the move. And sometimes you don't have to. There's some businesses that are as close to turnkey as possible, right? But a lot of them is like you're already making a bet. So you're playing with your poker chips. You better have some more on the table for growth and differentiation and improvements, right? And have a plan for that. And if you do, and it runs soundly, then you're generally in a better off place than most.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see, is especially when, on the topic of, making sure that you're going after acquisitions that are related to a skill set that you already have or you have some knowledge in. And I'm interested to hear from you, John, when you find an acquisition on, any of the third-party marketplaces or you happen to source a deal direct to Thrasio, what type of deal structures are you usually kind of putting together on the back end before acquiring an asset? Is there kind of a set template that you guys will use, or is it really just dependent on the business itself or, really what the returns look like in your 2-year plan?
We have a wide variety of templates, I would say, and they're constantly being moved. Right? Individual sellers have individual needs. We like to structure a lot of our deals based on some sort of upside earnout potential for the seller. That also helps us reduce our baseline multiple up front. What that does is allows us to deploy more cash to go buy more businesses. But because we are proven operators, right, and the growth rate across our entire brand portfolio is so exceptionally high, we can look at a seller straight in the face and say, hey, we're going to grow this business more than you can. We have more tools and ability to do that than you do. So what we want to do is pay you right now and give you the joy of coming on the ride with us for another few years while we take this thing and we blow it up. And what that does is it makes more advocates for Thrasio. And as we prove it over and over again, it makes for richer sellers, right? So for us, it's the best way to do business. It's worked out terrific for us. And if people can accept that as a reality of the marketplace and also embrace the fact that we're going to take their brand and make it better, we're going to take their baby and make marked improvements on it, something that they can be proud of, to sell their brand to $1 billion company and watch them take it to new heights is, I think, a really appealing incentive. And the fact that other people might be trying to aggregate in the space, but they simply don't have the operational history that we do. And that's what separates us. We know what we're doing. We've seen it all countless times. And we have the ability to stabilize brands, make them better, and do what we say. And by the way, there's nothing more we love than paying our earnouts, right? All that does is it builds more advocates for our company. And word of mouth is very important in this line of work.
That's excellent. I love that you guys, you really get the human element of the sellers you're working with, and that, you refer to the businesses as, this is your baby. I don't know if you feel maybe alone in that sense that, when you're out there acquiring, you really do understand like what's at stake in the personal investment that your sellers have made into their brands. And I get a sense from like just having observed you guys and your company that I think that's woven throughout your company as well. There's that human element of knowing that everyone's putting a lot into this engine. It's not like everybody who is, say, selling to Thras is like a cog in the machine. Like you're helping them on the next step, as you were saying earlier, right?
Yes. And honestly, I thank Carlos for this. And I think our natural culture sort of evokes this, even though people didn't know it, is when I'm out on the road, which has been rare, but I've done a couple of small trips, and I meet with sellers. I don't care if they sell to us or not. I really don't. I hope they do. I hope they find value in it. I want to help them be the best sellers possible, right? To me, again, all that does is give us another farther push of goodwill, right? And when you help someone out, often when they're ready to sell, they'll be the first person to come back to you. So for me, there's so many good things for sellers in this marketplace and in this current environment. I want to help them get to the best place that's possible for them. And if we do that and we take that attitude on, we'll get more people who will eventually sell to us. So it's a long game of trying to be the good guys as best as we can. And it's super important to me in my reputation in the space and our culture's reputation in the space that we take on that persona and we meet it. And if we do it, we know it will pay dividends for us.
No, that's excellent. I think we, especially in a difficult year like this, we need more good guys, more good people in the world for sure. Definitely value that perspective. I guess on that note, when we're talking about being on the same page with sellers and from a buyer's perspective and kind of bringing that human element in, we like to think that, we've certainly observed that in our process of working with you. And we're wondering, like, from your perspective, maybe what it's been like kind of working with us and the process of using a broker. From your perspective, what is it that, a broker sort of brings to the table for you? And how does that just hopefully make your life a little bit easier in this journey to acquire and grow as a company?
Sure. Like what I really like about working with you guys, and even though I haven't been on the deal team in quite some time, I'm still adjacent to it. What I always understood to be the case was you set up your sellers with realistic expectations of timelines, the marketplace, likely outcomes, and preparing a clean packet to deliver so we could disseminate information and make a decision quickly, right? So for us, it was just always like a clean transfer and generally good vibes throughout the entire process. I think what happens in the dealer community quite often, and I'm certainly not going to name any names, is they provide unrealistic expectations as to the likely multiple a seller might achieve. And then that seller gets anchored to it. In exchange for selling the pie in the sky multiple, what happens is the broker will ask for some long extended contract. And then what they do is they get that seller locked in. They hold them in there and they put them through this sort of dog and pony show of 60 calls. And eventually they say, hey, your price is too high. You got to come down. Whereas I believe that your firm makes a realistic presentation of what the multiple will likely be in the market as it stands today. And I think that's just super important to be upfront with the people that you're working with, right? And also like have them understanding some of the ancillary benefits that a firm like Thrasio might offer, i.e. the earnouts that I discussed before and other things like speed, or the fact that like if you get an LOI with us, we have it's a 90% plus close rate across our entire portfolio, right? So we're going to do what we say we're going to do. Whereas if you have someone who has zero Amazon experience or zero e-com experience and they're coming in, they're getting a loan for it, the process will be drawn out. The seller will be more tied to the buyer for a long period of time as a guiding partner. And it just makes the process much more difficult and stressful for the seller. And I think that's one thing that sellers don't realize is how stressful it can be to engage in this process while you're still trying to keep your business running smoothly. And with us, like, we like to think that one of our strengths is speed, efficiency, comfort, and taking all of that stress away from the seller, because it can be crushing. And we've certainly had sellers who've come to us who've had deals fall apart before because of all those unrealistic expectations and bad matches at different times.
Yeah, I completely see where you're coming from as well. So in Thrasio, once you guys decide to take on a business acquisition, could you walk us through the step-by-step process on what it is that you guys are planning to update or improve on that business and in order to get a timely ROI from that investment?
Sure. I don't want to delve too deeply into details because I do think that's actually part of our secret sauce. But let me just say this, that we have a 500-step process that every brand goes through after acquisition. So we have that figured out and those timelines locked up. But really, at the end of the day, we really get under the hood and we, in theory, fix everything.
Okay. So if you were to take your list of 500 checks and if you were to say, picking maybe 3, what would you say are the most impactful improvements you make to these acquisitions that once you've taken them fully under your wing?
Again, it depends on the individual brand. And sometimes it can be something that's like so simple. Again, I talked earlier about how many sellers, you just can't do everything, right? You just can't. There's just no way you're going to figure out everything. So for me, one of the things that's happened to us a few times is the seller's in the wrong shipping tier and they had no idea, right? And then all of a sudden you have a product that sells thousands upon thousands of units, every month, and they're charging $3 where they're getting an expense $3 per unit more than they should, right? Or if we just make some minor augmentation, we can solve that problem. Those are the type of things that exist everywhere, right? And for us, we have other things too, where our PPC protocols are best in class. So we can take on a new brand and just understand by just literally flipping a switch that we're going to get some gains almost instantly, both from, organic rank perspective and from performance on PPC. Then, we have a world-class branding team and we'll tear apart the entire branding, not in every case, and rebuild the entire thing and figure out a way. And then we'll look at other ways within and without and outside of Amazon to make the brand more than it is today. And that's the stuff that's really exciting for us as we take on new brands. It's, well, let's see what we can do with this one, right? And there's a whole plan that goes in there. One, it's more of like a conveyor belt sense of things. And the other one is more of our exploratory, again, that we make. And when we take on a brand, we're fully committed to making it everything it can be.
Absolutely. I love, this mention of all the different ways that you kind of come together to take these brands and scale them to places that, most people can only dream of. Now, we're talking about team and sort of, we talked earlier about this human element that you guys bring to the table, that you've got a huge team sort of vested into the mission of Thrasio. But I'm wondering, how did you handle sort of rapid expansion and, certainly from a team perspective? And what was the secret sauce to, not just expanding your portfolio, but your team as well? What would you say makes team building really work, even when you have to do it fast?
Sure. I would say that I give Carlos full credit for this. I want to say it was our first 43 hires. We didn't put a posting out for a CB, not a single one. It was all people that were within our network and Carlos's network that we put together. So we were to get from 0 to 43 people, without having any HR work done. That was phase 1. And that's something that's, we think it's exceptionally hard to replicate, to get really, really top class people in every aspect of the business, from supply chain to finance, legal, marketing, branding, from M&A, all of that, we had best in class. From there, when we knew that our growth was going to exacerbate, we found people who had experience doing that before and who knew how to create pathways that led to optimal growth, right? There's all these thresholds that we all know about if you read any business literature about how things change relative to the size of your company. And for us, it was always a matter of finding a way to prepare for those things and to find the right people to layer in above and below certain positions to make sure that those transitions went smoothly. And one of the things I think that we're very good at understanding is that us as individuals are not good at everything either. You find someone who's smarter at an esoteric domain or has experience, and wherever they are, you go find them and you give them the opportunity to optimize. And I think for us, that's been exceptionally important. I think the other piece, and I will give myself and some of the other early members credit here, is that culture is immensely important. I want Thrasio to be a wonderful place to work, fun, irreverent sometimes, positive risk-taking, honest discourse. All of those things mean the world to me. When we started this, we wanted to be a fun place to work and a fun place to grow. And I think we've done an exceptionally good job at accomplishing that goal. There's no climbing over your neighbor to try to get to the top. It's everyone helping each other, right? Everyone given the opportunity to grow. Smart people. I mean, there's just smart people everywhere. And anyone who's been around, you sort of, you get a mixed bag in most companies. At Thrasio, we have some truly exceptional talent. And the other piece to which I think is important is exploratory autonomy, right? You need structure and disruption happening in harmony in order to get where you want to be as a company. And I think we've done a really good job facilitating that. And last year, Danny just hit his 1-year anniversary. We brought in Danny Bachvar, who had executive experience at Weight Watchers, the NFL experience, and the Girl Scouts. And he's done just a masterful job of maintaining our culture, maintaining high levels of communication across our wide variety of teams that exist all over the world, and just building the framework that's allowed us to grow to the size we are today. So I know that's a long-winded answer, but it's sort of something that I'm passionate about and maybe most proud about out of all the things that we've done.
I think it is one of those things that a lot of, people maybe in the startup world get ahead of themselves and they're thinking about something at the finish line, like, I'm going to be a unicorn. And they're not thinking about the people and the human cost it takes to get there. And then, you read so many horror stories of companies that grow really big, really fast, but they can't seem to grow the right team, or they can't seem to hold on to the talent. And I think that's what makes it really special, what you guys have been able to do. It's like, yes, you've had amazing achievements. You've reached unicorn status faster than anyone else, yet you've done it in a really intentional and very sort of human-driven way, which I think is fantastic. It's a nice sort of, like you said, you want to be the good guys in the situation, but it's like when the good guys win, which I think, again, like I said earlier, we need more of this year. And so I love that, your people have kind of come together to create this complex system, like you had mentioned before. Obviously, most people listening to this podcast, they're not going to have what you have in place. They're not going to have, all these amazing teams throughout the world to help build their portfolios. So I'm wondering if you could maybe give advice for, let's say, the quote unquote normal, say, seller or buyer out there who are in the Amazon FBA space. How would you advise them to systematize growth, even though, say they don't have all of your team like you do?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I'll take this in sort of two parts for me. Part number one is your affinity to risk, right? And I think I forget, it's a comedian Bill Burr who said it's okay to be sleeping on your friend's couch at 30. For me, if I believe in a product and an idea, I go for it. And I throw the kitchen sink at it, period. And I don't look back, and I realize that I'm not fighting for tomorrow's lunch. I'm fighting for something that's a year or two down the road. And that commitment is often the thing I see missing most, right? It's more I got these 4 ideas. I'm going to order a couple hundred units. I'm going to try it. I'm going to kind of half launch all of them and see if they catch. I think that's foolhardy to do. So for me, it's commit to something. Understand that if it's a total flop, you'll still be fine. But I'd rather be all in and live with the consequences than be half in and just kind of see how things go. Now, that's not for everybody. That's maybe how I see the world. But I look at the successes that we've had launching our own products, right? And that sort of level of commitment and care is the reason why they were successful. The other thing I look at too is understand what you're good at and what you're not good at, and find someone who's good at the thing you're not. And that can be part of your commitment too. I don't know PPC. Okay, I'm going to check 9 different software providers to figure out which one's best for me. Or I'm going to hire a consultant who's going to fix this problem for me so I can work on my business and not in it. And that's the other thing that I find with people who are scrappy, and I put myself certainly in that category, is like you can get working in things too much, right? Instead of being like, oh, maybe a VA over in the Philippines can handle this for me, right? Or maybe, yeah, it's going to cost me a little bit of money, but I can outsource this because A, I don't like doing it, and B, I'm not very good at it. And then I could work on figuring out a way to differentiate my new product that I want to launch and make it the best product possible. That gets me to my next point. Focus on your product. Better be a good one. You can only fake your way to it for so long, and that's getting harder and harder. So focus on product quality. Understand what your customer base is looking for, what their pain points are, and how you can solve them. And if you do all of those things, I think your likelihood for success increases. Having the humility to be like, I don't know how to do this right, but I'm going to find a solution to do it because that's my commitment to this project, is a better way of doing it. There's a maxim that I say all the time in my team meetings. I think it comes from Carl Jung, which is like, what you need most is in the place you least want to look, right? We all know things that like we're not good at, and we know we should face, but we choose not to. Having the bravery to face them and to maybe find other people to help you solve those problems is a good way to look at life in general, and certainly an online business.
Yeah, it's really valuable, insight into, how, taking a step back, if you happen to not have a team, willing to help you with systemizing growth for your business, that, you can take certain steps and preparation with, your acquisition to make sure that you are, gaining the most from your effort as well too. And yeah, it's really great to hear you say that as well. And I'm curious, you had mentioned, making sure that you have a great product, making sure you have a solid foundation to build on, if you do happen to acquire an established business from a marketplace. But I'm curious, even with the perfect product in the world, John, I'm curious, how has Thrasio, or how has your company's portfolio handled the current times that we've been going through with coronavirus and, shipping issues and all of these other, problems that have been going on with the global pandemic? How has that affected, Thrasio as a whole?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's been a wild freaking ride.
Yeah.
I'll tell you that much. I would say, again, we called our first meeting on coronavirus. It was early to mid-January. So we were aware of something coming down the pike, and we started our preparations for it. So right in that time, we made sure that we facilitated our orders that were much larger than usual to be the first in line, either right before or right after Chinese New Year for our POs. That, however, didn't help us out with everything, because all of a sudden sales went through the roof too, right? So it was a balance of sort of like making predictive models of what we think were going to happen and doing the best we could. And Monir, who runs our supply chain, is a magician, and he really saved us from much more pain. But we have been taking steps to secure our supply chain on a really holistic level that was already happening before coronavirus. But this sort of black swan event was, fruitful, challenging, painful, all those things wrapped into one. And, it'll be let's put it this way, when things get back to more of a structured normal, it'll be much easier on us in some ways.
Yeah, I completely agree. And it's worth noting as well, something that you kind of pushed me into the direction of thinking as well, is we tend to always learn from our mistakes, not always something that we do correct the first time. So, going through this black swan event and learning, certain things that you can cut or, optimize on the back end of each of these businesses that you guys have in your portfolios, also something that can also, maybe help weather a future storm or any other issues that might come down the road with these individual assets. And then I'm also curious, we were talking earlier and you had mentioned something that I did a little bit of research on, but how is it that Thrasio has been able to handle Prime Day? And, how have you been able to do it with, across such a large portfolio? And what are the kinds of things that FBA business owners can learn from your preparation?
Any event like a Prime Day, have your first meeting in June if you think it's going to be in October. We didn't know it was going to be October this year, but like be months ahead of the game, right? And then go again to your sort of like threshold of risk to be like, oh, maybe I got to lay out a bunch extra for inventory right now, even though it messes up my cash flow, because I know I'm going to have a very fruitful Prime Day, right? And then with this one too, we had the whole issue of all right, well, Prime Day is October, where the holiday peak is right around the corner. How do you do inventory management for that, right? And then, like, I know I haven't been privy to these meetings, but I know Chinese New Year meetings have already happened in our company, right? So it's really looking ahead and planning accordingly.
Okay. So getting a jump start before, even an inkling of the holiday season is looking to start. You want to make sure that you're fully prepared, stocked up, everything is in order prior to any of that type of beginning.
Yeah.
Correct.
That's awesome. Well, so this one, I think taking a step back and in a way looking forward feels a little bit difficult to do. And I've said this to other interviewees, feels hard to look forward, especially this year where things have been unpredictable. But I'm wondering, you've certainly seen quite a rapid change over the past few years. If you could look forward, what are the sort of changes you could predict for the future of the FBA industry?
That's a really good question. I think there's a lot of variables at play here. I expect FBA to go strong for a good while, right? My logic is based on this. It's that we basically, because of coronavirus, jumped 10 years ahead of the normal arc would have taken us as far as what e-com represents as a percentage of retail. Right? We literally took a 10-year jump in theoretically in 45 days when those numbers were put out. I don't think that's going back. I believe that people are creatures of habit. And I believe that once grandma has purchased her first bath towel from Amazon and signed up for an account, you don't go back, right? And certainly when you're ordering stuff, even if coronavirus was to completely disappear tomorrow and we're all open and free, when you get in the comfortable cadence of ordering things online, it's a really hard habit to break. So because of that, I see the FBA world being strong going forward. However, I would put a caveat on that a platform like this isn't going to remain potentially stable forever. There's other types of shopping experiences that will become more at the forefront of how people consume, right? And that can be how Instagram changes, or how Shopify changes, or how they make it easier to get that one-touch experience. That is going to change the dynamics of the market over time. And, I think people have to accept that that's a reality that could come to fruition. We don't know if it will or not, but it's something that I will be, and the company will be, looking out for, certainly on the horizon.
Oh, I feel like you answered my next question in a way, because, I was going to ask, was there anything that would possibly, say, tempt you away from a future at an FBA? If there was a monetization out there that could compete with what you've done in FBA, if there's a different business model, understand, like you're saying, you're basically having to watch and see what changes unfold. But I guess to sort of circle back to where you were at your start, you started with looking at, we're seeing this movement happen from Shopify to FBA. So is it that you would expand more into e-commerce, or would you actually branch out entirely from e-commerce and go a different direction if the opportunity presented itself?
Look, I think we have a focused strategy going forward that I think will allow some levels of expansion. And for us, our secret sauce is, I think to be frank with you, pretty much there, figuring out how all these things tie together, right? And that to me is the most exciting part of the future, and something that we've been focusing on now for over a year and are just starting to see the fruits of that focus. So again, it dives into our sort of secret sauce territory, so I don't want to dive into it too much, but there is when you're an individual seller, there's something very clean about just running a very clean, let's say, FBA business. It can become very predictable, it's very easy to understand, and it can be very attractive to a buying audience. Layering in how to understand every other marketplace and every other potential pathway and understanding how they interact with each other is an extremely complex endeavor. But once you figure those things out, it really can create a strategic advantage. But for me, for most sellers, doing too much of that, you're sort of, you're just going to drain your EBITDA to a point, right? So, but as at our large scale, like those are the type of things that we're trying to figure out, is sort of protect every piece of the ship.
Absolutely. Well, and again, I won't dig too much where the secret sauce lies. I understand that is, what makes you guys unique and stand out. It is certainly just really wonderful to get the chance to be able to speak to you today and for you to take some time and talk to us about what this journey has been like and where the growth opportunities are. I've certainly learned a lot through this conversation, and it's been really enjoyable. So just really appreciate you coming on.
Cool. Absolutely. Yeah. No worries. All right, guys, you have a great evening, morning, day, wherever you are in the world.
Thanks again, John.
Hey everyone, as promised, now that we've wrapped up the episode and learned about building a powerful Amazon FBA portfolio, we wanted to connect you with some of the best listings in the Amazon FBA space. So first, we have listing 47601. This is actually an FBA and e-commerce business. It was created in September 2018 in the equipment niche. One of the reasons that we wanted to bring up this listing in particular is it's got such a nice set of diversification here. So it's diversified through Amazon FBA, eBay, and Shopify, meaning that you're not necessarily tied down to one platform. Obviously, we spent a lot of this episode talking about just FBA in particular, but as we've seen before in our studies, venturing off Amazon FBA to sort of incorporate e-commerce just can make many businesses stronger. So definitely one of the reasons we want to highlight this business. Another reason is that it kind of made me think about John's approach to acquiring businesses and taking a business over and sort of radically changing it to make sure it's as optimal as possible. This business already has some pretty clear optimization points that would just be pretty easy for the buyer to take on. So one of the things is that the seller is currently inspecting and barcodes products before shipping them to Amazon. It's for a really, really small number of sales, just international sales. But the fact that the seller does a little bit of self-fulfilling orders just means that there's room to improve this. So, doing something like outsourcing inventory management to a 3PL would make the business pretty much hands-off, which I think is a great opportunity. Another really cool opportunity is that there has been demonstrated demand for these products from large contracts from the US and foreign governments. And so that's huge. I mean, the fact that there's already a solid demand from something like, government contracts, I think is a massive growth opportunity, which just don't come across every day. So that's why I wanted to bring up this listing, because I actually think it's got some really interesting potential that we don't always see.
Yeah, I completely agree with you, Sarah. And I also noticed with this listing 47601 that you're talking about that it also has included SOPs. So you shouldn't be scared from an Amazon business that has too many SKUs, as one might consider 568 SKUs too many. But having SOPs, having templates and other, forms of operating the business, kind of templated form of knowing what needs to be done on the back end can help you in the end to manage this many SKUs. Now, if you're looking for something that has fewer SKUs and maybe might be in your eyes something easier to manage if it's your first business acquisition, you might want to consider taking a look at listing number 48929, which is also an Amazon FBA business that was created in May 2017 in the health and fitness niche. This particular business only has 5 SKUs and the Amazon Seller Central account is included. So a little bit more easier to manage if you're not looking to start into the Amazon FBA space, managing hundreds of SKUs. This is a great opportunity to kind of have a foundation already built for you to come in, scale the business, and then you can ultimately add in SKUs as you find out what your market is demanding based on the current products that you have within the product line. So a really great opportunity with this business. Also, based on the fact that it only sells in Canada, has a few extra doors that you can open, expanding into other marketplaces such as the EU or even the US market, which could also offer, another growth opportunity for buyers should they branch out into those other places. And yeah, having a strong agency in place to help with ads also with this particular business is another great asset. And then additional growth opportunities such as, trademarking the brand or adding in brand registry is also another low-hanging fruit that a buyer could come in and scale this business to its full potential. All right, everyone. Well, thanks for tuning into another great episode of the Opportunity Podcast. We hope that you've gained some valuable insight to the opportunities digital acquisitions offer. Click the link in the description or visit empireflippers.com/marketplace to learn more about these businesses or other listings currently live on our platform. If you've enjoyed this episode, be sure to leave a review if you love what you're hearing, and subscribe to this channel for more great content released every week. Until next time, we're your hosts. I'm Brandon.
And I'm Sarah, and thanks for tuning in to the Opportunity Podcast.